Hi.
Ela foi infeliz naquela reforma. O apartamento era muito mais amplo. Ela diminuiu com a reforma que ela fez. Não foi boa. Ela é leigo fazendo, né? Ela abafou o apartamento. O apartamento maior que a gente já viu aqui, sabe? Nessa faixa. Você está falando de que apartamento que a gente viu hoje? Não. Lavínia. Ah, sim. Eu acredito que ela não tenha vendido por esse preço que ele falou. Zezé, aquele apartamento, as garagens eram vagas. Eram fechadinhos.
She suddenly asked me the very last minute the questions and asking me the guest speaker, guest moderator. I asked her if I interrupt any negative impact because my knowledge is really low. But she needed my help, so I'm always happy to help her. First of all, we have three very distinguished speakers who will present us and take us to a different side of the world, which is Beirut, Hong Kong, and Brasilia. Before we start, we would like to welcome President of UIA, Mr. Thomas Fournier, to give us a very welcoming speech. Please.
Não, ainda não começou.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Moderator Lee. Thank you, Insuk and Rizvan, for this opportunity to discuss adaptive reuse and heritage in a changing world. And thank you also to your distinguished panelists for joining your names to the UIA, the good names of your organizations and your work. Adaptation and change are certainly key words today. And it's ironic, just a little more than a year ago in Baku, Azerbaijan, we were addressing ourselves to the issues of mass tourism, which at the time was a very grave challenge. Now we see threats, and some of them are caused by the lack of tourism, ironically. This refers, of course, to the pandemic and the terrible toll that it's taking all over the globe. We hope for better times, and we're also seeing new manifestations of old conflicts. And for these too, we hope for better times. Thank you, Insuk and Rizvan, for focusing on three vital places from three regions of the UIA, Brasilia, Hong Kong, and Beirut, all of them important parts of the world, all of them experiencing difficulty and danger. As places subject to the ravages of climate change, political strife, inequality, and even cataclysm, they are certainly primary examples. And I will focus for just a moment on Beirut. The explosion on the 4th of August destroyed dozens of buildings completely. It left hundreds of buildings in danger of collapsing or severely compromised, and tens of thousands more buildings affected, with many thousands of people left homeless, not to mention deaths and terrible injuries. I know that Jad Tabet will touch upon this in some detail in his talk, but for my part, as UIA president, I want to express frustration. Frustration because when tragedy strikes, as it so often does, in the form of earthquakes, floods, fires, terror attacks, and other events, we seem unable to do much more than offer condolences, expressions of sorrow, expressions of goodwill, and expressions of solidarity. As important and sincere as these are, I always feel that we as architects must do more. We need to do more. And I have made that commitment as UIA president to Jad Tibet and to our colleagues in the Order of Engineers and Architects of Lebanon for specific and tangible steps that we can take as a union for the help of the people of Beirut. We issued a solicitation to all member sections of the UIAs for ideas, and we have received wonderful responses from the People's Republic of China, from South Africa, and a couple of others. More are going to come, and I know you will hear about this. I have two to add. First, with Ernesto Ottoni, who is the Assistant Director General for Culture at UNESCO. He has requested that the UIA help, and I know that Ernesto visited Beirut shortly after the explosion, and he asked us to work with him and UNESCO to nominate people to serve in conducting a comprehensive review of the codes and the standards and the guidelines that affect development in Beirut, and particularly in those historic areas that are affected by the explosion. So we intend to work with UNESCO on that. Second, we've heard from colleagues in France and Belgium who have advanced the idea of an international competition, not for replanning or redesigning Beirut, but for a memorial devoted to the memory of the people lost in the explosion and a memorial to the event itself. As you know, I think the UIA has a long and very distinguished history with design competitions, and if this proves to be of interest to the people of Beirut, to our colleagues in the Order of Engineers and Architects, and to the city of Beirut, we certainly stand ready to help and to serve. So with a warm sense of welcome and encouragement, I look forward to the sessions today. I extend my thanks again to this important work program of the UIA for inviting me to open the address, and I turn it back to you, Moderator Lee, with great thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your speech. We have three vice presidents. The first of all, we have Mr. Nikos Fintikakis. Are you here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Please, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Insu. Okay, do you hear me?
Can you ask everyone to turn their microphones off, please?
Okay, do you hear me now? Okay. Okay, may I have the floor?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Insu, for this webinar. Although I thought that following the previous one, this would be dedicated only to Beirut. But I'm happy to see Roberto, who is invited to participate in the Brazilian one. And I would like to thank you all for this meeting. I must say to everybody that I have the feeling that concerning heritage, we are living again in an environment of the Second World War, and additionally, a coronavirus war. Therefore, as architects, we need to create now a new Bauhaus movement against the autocracy of our times and our regimes, or even a romantism movement against feudalism. Architectural heritage is the result of political and religious conflicts, as expressed in urban and buildings design. That's clear. Therefore, according to me, the philosophy architects are, as all humans, political beings, are politicals, and architecture is an art and political and social science. Remember what happened in the period of Taliban, when these apolitical terrorists, they destroyed the heritage everywhere. So in Beirut, we are all obliged to offer to our Lebanese colleagues the best of our knowledge, the best of our feelings, in order to help. And for what everything is proposed, I think that the Lebanese order and the Lebanese architects are those who will select the kind of help they need from UIA. So hope to hear Dr. Beth and others to speak about the damage of Beirut heritage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have two other vice presidents, and the second one is Mr. Roberto Simon. Would you like to give us a welcoming speech, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Sujon. First of all, I would like to congratulate Sursock and Rizwan for this webinar. Of course, I extend my congratulations to all the people involved with this so important program, and so well done. It's an honor for me to be here with another three vice presidents, as I can see here, Mohammed, Nikos, and John Hu, and say hello to Vasilis Gutas, who was always a leader for me since 2000 or 1999. I can't remember exactly. Mr. President, who is here, I talked before, and everyone. Permit me say something about Daniel Mangabeira. I think today we have among us one of the talents of the new generation of architects of Brazil, and particularly from our federal district and District of Columbia in the US, is Brasilia. I'm very proud to introduce Daniel, who is too much involved with these new architects and the new architecture and the heritage in not just in South America, but in Central America. He knows very much about that. Many other architects, talents, who I am very proud to know. But at the same time, represent a new generation involved with the organization of the profession in this side of the globe. Daniel is also, he's in practice, of course, he's very good, but Daniel is today a president of CAU of the Federal District. It's not the same of a national level. Well, now we have more and more talking about architecture to live better in UIA. Must become probably our mantra, needs to be our mantra. Well, I'm sure heritage and cultural protection is fundamental for all reasons, but need to be the center of discussion. As circular architecture, as retrofit, both are tremendously important to the sustainability of our small world. Yesterday, in October 5, we celebrate the World Architecture Day. Yesterday, Architects around the world proclaiming the value of architecture and the quality of built environment and to improve people's well-being and environmental balance. But we need strongly reaffirm our commitment with a mission that guides and gives meaning to our profession in this challenge. The coronavirus pandemic, which has caused us to spend more time in our homes, has reshaped customs and social space, and once again has revealed around the world that crisis disproportionately affects the poorest and more vulnerable populations. This reality reminds us of the importance of good built environment and good architecture in protecting our health, but at the same time, our history, our culture, and improve our living condition. But we have overcome the pandemic and the response to the economic crisis derived from it had been challenged. It will continue to be necessary to address the social and climatic changes that progressively degrade our quality of life. This pre-pandemic challenge requires an acceleration transformation of our cities, buildings, and homes. And I am very proud to be here in this meeting, this webinar, discussing that and listen and learning about that. Learning from people who is deeply involved with these problems. And I'm here to learn, and please, let's improve this day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simon. Lastly, we have Mr. Jong-Yul Han from Korea. They are another vice president for Reason 4. Please.
Thank you, Sujang. I'm glad to be here. I saw many familiar, friendly face, starting from our honorary president, Vasilis Godas, our president, Thomas Vernier, and also actually 4 vice presidents of UIA over here. I saw Munyanya and Roberto and Nikos. And from all the way from Egypt, Mona Radi, and many more, Andre from the Russia, yes. So it's so good to see you. And it's amazing that we got together in this time, different time zones. It's after 1 a.m. in Korea right now. So I'm almost sleeping now, but so as our president, Thomas Vernier, mentioned before, we had those gathering at Baku, and the topic at the time was mass tourism, over tourism. And contrary to that, right now, as Thomas said, that we are facing very different the situation all over the world. And something happens in Beirut, but we cannot travel there. Even though we want to help, it's very hard to go there. So I think it poses different kind of questions about heritage, about historic space and places. How are we gonna deal with this in time like this, that nobody can travel much, so many heritage space can be deserted, abandoned. So how we actually monitor and see how each organization keep it as a safe and a good place. It's another challenge. I'm not very good at heritage, but I think with Insuk and everybody here, maybe we start to think about different viewpoints of the heritage, how to preserve it in different way in situation like this pandemic. So I'm very happy to see you all, and I like to hear a very good the seminars and the speeches and all those discussions. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Back to Sujang.
Thank you very much, Mr. Han. Do we have more Vice President, Dr. Cho?
So one more from Munanya from Region 5.
Okay, I will give the speaker.
Yes,
Yes, please.
Thank you, the moderator, that is Song Jung Lee, and In-Suk Cho. I'm having to learn to pronounce these great names. Greetings from Region 5. I'm very happy to be here. It was a kind of a last minute to make sure I'm here to represent our region. Although you invited us on 30th September, it was not clear that we needed to invite other speakers. But I'm happy that Kevin is here and Mona is here. They are our regular troops, and we are very happy to have them. Just a very good word, a quick word, that heritage is actually global. We will be happy to move together on heritage. For those who attended the council meeting in Egypt, you know the strength of heritage. The meeting was on the Nile and the pyramid and all. I can mention a lot of heritage sites in Africa. And so can I mention many heritage sites in the rest of the world. So thank you so much, In-Suk Cho and all the participants. And I'm looking forward to a good session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. Before we start, probably would you check yourself on your photograph on the bottom left? You will see your name as well as your microphone is off or on. So would you turn off your microphone so that we can have only speakers' presentations voice, please? Okay, almost everyone. Thank you very much. We have, sorry. Today we have three presentations, as Dr. Cho mentioned and other mentions as well, from three different regions. We will have the presentation session first. Each of presentation will be taking about 20 minutes so that we have a very finish on time. As you know that in Korean time it's 1:30 already, so we will make sure to be finished on time with a very productive way. Three speakers after that, we will have a 15-minute discussion session. So that means between the three speakers, we do not have any questions or answers or discussion session. We will have at the end all together. We will not probably have enough time, but for making a very productive discussions at the end for 15 minutes, if anyone who has any threading topics that, to speak all three different topics of the three different speakers, then we will have talk about those kind of limited topics at the end. So are we all ready to start? Okay, I'll say yes. Our first speaker is Mr. Jad Tabet from Region 2. He is a very distinguished architect and planner working between Beirut and Paris. He is currently president of Lebanese Federation of Engineers and Architects, also president of Organization of Arab Architects, and also he is a member of UNESCO High-Level Reflection Group for Strategic Transformation and former member for the UNESCO World Heritage Committee. He's an author of several academic publications as well on war and reconstructions, which he's going to talk about today, and also on the relationship between heritage and modernity. He taught architecture in many different universities all over the world. Today, he will speak about the ongoing reconstruction project of Beirut after the devastating explosions on 4th of August this year. I'd like to give our microphone to Mr. Tabet. Is he here today?
Thank you. Yes, hello.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can you see the screen?
Can you? Yeah, but
You want to
small.
control yourself?
Yes, is it possible?
Yes, I will make you a host, then you can control it. Please wait
But
for a
it's written
moment.
in Korean. I can't read it.
Yes. Let
I
me.
can't read how to. Okay. So maybe I do it myself. Then, no, it doesn't work this way.
So you are become a host. So please.
Okay. So can you put the no, just a moment,
Yes.
a moment, please.
Can you control it yourself?
I will see, just a moment.
Yeah.
Are you seeing everything or?
Yes.
Is it okay like this?
I think so.
Are you seeing the screen?
Yeah, please.
Everybody is seeing the screen? Okay. So thank you for inviting me tonight for this webinar. As a matter of fact, what you see now is a picture taken by NASA during the blast that shows the degree of damages, and mainly the area that has been most damages due to the blast. The blast occurred on August 4, 2020 at 6:11 p.m. It was felt everywhere in the city. I'm living at 2.5 kilometers from the blast, and I was in my living room, and I thought the explosion was just in the street under my house. The whole building was shaken because of the explosion. And the windows, the glass windows in my living room, so it was really something that never happened in Lebanon. You know, Lebanon witnessed several wars, very difficult, very, shocking, etc. But it is the first time that we have such a giant explosion. The explosion first occurred in the port of Beirut. It occurred in this place where there was a storehouse. The whole building was destroyed and water came inside. I mean, there was a huge crater, you know, here, and the water of the sea entered in place of the earth. The whole third basin of the port, which you can see here, was destroyed, and mostly the silos with grains, 120,000 tons of grains of corn were destroyed. And these silos were, in fact, hosting the strategic reserves of Lebanon for months. And you can see here what remains of these silos. The neighborhoods most affected by the blast are located on the southern and eastern end of the harbor. You can see here the map of the area that was most affected. You had 35 buildings totally collapse, 300 buildings under risk of total or partial collapse that had 2,000 households, 700 buildings with severe damages, 5,000 households, and 30,000 buildings affected everywhere in the town and in the city, and also in the neighborhoods, not only in the city. 250,000 households were affected. I know that for China, for Korea, these numbers are not very big, but in Lebanon, you know, Lebanon is a country with 4 million inhabitants. So when you have 250,000 households that are affected, it's a huge, huge, huge catastrophe for our country. If we go here to see the summary of the infrastructure impact, this excludes public infrastructure damages. You see that for the housing, the financial requirements are around 1,830 million US dollars, which means $1,030,000 billion. For the healthcare, we have 17 damaged hospitals, 16 damaged primary healthcare centers. For education, we had 120 damaged schools and 8 damaged universities, and 26,000 business with low level of damages, and around 4,000 businesses with medium level, and around 500 businesses with high level of damage. 8 historic areas were affected. We'll see that a little bit later. The social impact of the explosion is huge. We have 31,000 uninhabitable houses, which amount to almost 13,000 households in need of shelter. 172,000 individuals in urgent need and of food assistance, and 6,500 patients were treated for physical injuries, and 145,000 patients need mental health support. 67,000 students were impacted due to school damages, and 130,000 jobs were directly affected. Coming to heritage, this is a map that shows in yellow the location of the heritage buildings in the most damaged area and around. We have 975 heritage buildings in the region that were affected by the blast, and of these, 640 heritage buildings severely or moderately damaged. If we go to the damage to cultural heritage, 8 historic areas and cultural fabric have been damaged, because it's not only historic buildings, it's a real historic fabric. In the area most affected by the blast, we have 480 heritage building damaged, and in the surrounding areas, 160, which amounts to 640 buildings. Now, if we go to the history a little bit, a small historical account of the area. You see in the middle, the old city, the old Beirut city. This is a map of 1870, okay? You have here the old city, and you see how the city started developing along the roads that lead to the main cities in the north, Tripoli, Damascus in the east, Saida in the south, etc. And the area where the blast occurred is to the eastern part of the old city, near the port, just in front of the port. The area started to develop at the end of the 19th century. This is a picture of around, I think it's 1870 or 1875, where, I mean, it's a drawing, it's a drawing of that period. You see some houses and palaces that were built outside the old city. Rich families started building palaces on the hills above the port, while the other families, I mean the more modest families, started extending or living in the road that is along the port, the lower road that is along the coastline. This is one of the palaces, which is now a Sursock museum. It's one of the palaces built by one of the rich family on top of the hill above the port. This was severely damaged. All the glass windows were broken. All the interior doors, etc., were broken. Even the collection, they had very interesting painting collection of from Lebanese art. These painting collection were also damaged. You have, I mean, this palace witnessed really huge damages. From the top of the hill, you have a series of staircases that go down, linking let's say the upper city with the down city. The upper city is the city of the rich families, and the lower city is the city that is along the port. And you have a series of staircases that are still here today that links the upper city with the lower city. And all this is a sort of vernacular urban fabric. You have some heritage buildings, you have very normal, I mean, buildings also, but the whole fabric is a vernacular fabric. This is a picture of the lower part, the street that is along the coast, along the port. You see here buildings at the right. You have buildings of the Ottoman periods with the triple arch motif, and you have to the left buildings from the French Mandate period, which is the 1920s. With a European style. I mean, you have the mixture of these two type of architectural styles, late Ottoman with the triple arch and pitched roof and red tiles. And the other side, you have the European, I mean, the Mandate period colonial type of architecture. The whole area is, I mean, mainly of this type of architectural style. Now, one of the particularity of this neighborhood that developed since the World War I, east and then north, is that it received a lot of refugees that came and settled there. You had, first of all, the Armenian refugees that came after World War I, after the massacres in Anatolia and Sicilia. You have then the Kurds that came and settled also in the area. So the area witnessed a sort of mixity of people, of cultures, etc., etc. It's a very rich area, culturally rich area. And the area witnessed relative stability until the 90s. I mean, even during the war, there was some families left the area, but the area stayed with this mixity of population and this sort of, mixture of families, of cultures, of origins, etc. During the 90s, what happened is that after reconstruction of the downtown, the area witnessed a sort of development, sort of capitalistic financial type of development. There were some towers that were built. You can see one of them in the background here. There were some towers that were built there, but mainly the area witnessed a process of gentrification. You can see, for example, here what happens with the stairs. The stairs became a sort of a guided tour, became a sort of touristic attraction. There were a lot of bars, a lot of restaurants, and also a lot of artistic and cultural activities, galleries, etc., etc. So the mixture of population became even more strong, with also youth, new comers from the youth that came and mixed with the old population that was traditional population that was living there. It was really an area of the city that was vivid day and night, and that that hosted a lot of activities and different generations. It is there, it is in this part of the city, which is one of the most vivid parts, that the explosion came and that where most destruction occurred. It was a real apocalypse now, yes, apocalypse now, and a social tragedy. The explosion killed 200 people, injured 6,500 people, and forced the displacement of not less than 20,000 people. It's a real social tragedy for us. One view of these towers that I spoke about that were totally, as you see, destroyed by the explosion. The damages are terrible. Damages to heritage buildings, but you can see here the central hall to the right, etc. Damage to heritage buildings. These buildings are done with stone walls, red tile pitched roof, and they are very fragile. They date from basically from the 19th century and the early 20th century, and most of these buildings were really severely damaged. The fabric also, the vernacular fabric was also damaged. This is a picture of, I mean, what part of the neighborhood, where you see typically how you have small buildings, you have green areas, you have gardens, you have staircases, etc., etc. And you see how the fabric is really severely damaged. Another view with the building to the right from the early 50s, early modern architecture. And then you have the buildings from the Ottoman period, mixture of styles and of architectural styles. So, oh, I'm sorry. Go back. No, go back. Sorry, just a moment. Okay. So is it okay? Are you seeing the screen?
Yeah.
It's okay. Well, so what happened is that just after the blast, there was a huge mobilization. I mean, thousands of Lebanese and mostly young people were mobilized to start removing the rebels, helping the people to restore their houses, or at least to clean the streets, to clean the houses, etc., etc. You know, the situation in the country is, we have a government which is totally, I mean, frozen. They don't do anything. We have a huge economic crisis, a huge economic crisis in in the country. There have been during years a sort of Ponzi pyramid, and this Ponzi at the scale of the whole nation, and the Ponzi pyramid broke last year, so people don't have money. The money that people have in the banks are frozen, and the government, due to a lot of political crisis, etc., doesn't do anything. Totally absent. All public institutions are absent. There's nobody. So the civil society is really doing the whole job. There was just several days after the explosion, you had several initiatives. A group of architects, of archaeologists, created what is called the Beirut Built Heritage Rescue 2020, BBHR 2020. To assess damages to all heritage built houses, heritage buildings, to set up emergency measures to protect the building and to to prevent the collapse of these buildings. There was another initiative by a group of architects and lawyers, etc., from the civil society that created the Beirut Heritage Initiative to try to receive donations to help the rebuilding. And the Order of Engineers and Architects did a whole complete survey of the structural situation of all the buildings in the area. We surveyed 3,800 buildings. We have a complete assessment of the structural stability and the envelope of these buildings. And this assessment was used by all international organizations, all international bodies and national governmental bodies to give to do the figures of the damages and to assess the importance of the damages. We mobilized around more than 400 engineers and architects who worked during 4 weeks on the ground to do the assessment. The assessment now is done, and it is used, as I tell you, to see, to assess the amount of damages and how things can be, what should be done now. Now we have mainly some emergencies. The first thing is the rapid intervention on buildings that have, the rapid intervention on buildings that with partial and total collapse, that face partial or total collapse. This is being done now. It will take maybe, what's important is to do it before the winter, because it's crucial to ensure the safe return of the families before the rainy season begins. And the rainy season begins, will begin 1st of November, most probably. Another thing is the return of economic activities. It's very important that this part of the town that is today completely dead during the night and even during the day. During the day, you have people, you have volunteers, you have NGOs, etc. But this is not enough. It's very important to help economic activities to come back to the region in order to give it more life and in order to help life start again in the region. On the longer run, what's important is to think about heritage not only as rehabilitation of old buildings or of heritage buildings. It's very important to think on the historic urban landscape approach that was developed by UNESCO 15 years ago. This approach moves beyond the preservation of the physical environment and focuses on the entire human environment with all its tangible and intangible qualities. I think this approach is the most appropriate for the reconstruction and the revitalization of the affected neighborhoods. This approach integrates the goals of urban heritage conservation and the goals of social and economic development. And this is what we are trying to do now. I mean, the order has is putting now a group. I mean, we started working with 7 universities, 7 faculties of architecture and planning. We will launch a declaration, most probably, I mean, it will be launched on next Friday, a declaration on our vision of the reconstruction of these neighborhoods. And we are creating an urban observatory in the order with the different universities to start to collect data, to analyze data, and to propose to make some propositions for the future of these neighborhoods. That goes beyond, as I'm saying, reconstruction of heritage buildings, and goes a little, I mean, further integrate all other economic, social, landscape, tangible, intangible qualities of the area. Now, if we come to the adaptive reuse, since we are supposed to speak about the adaptive reuse, I will give some examples. You have, for example, the old railway station in Manifile, which is abandoned. We are working with Palestinian RIWAC NGO, who is proposing to finance and to work on the rehabilitation of this abandoned railway station to transform it into a museum of the trains. We have there very interesting three very nice trains that date from the 19th century that are still in place, and also we can develop a sort of cultural museum with exhibitions, etc., about the whole story of the railway that was linking Beirut to Palestine, to Cairo, and then to the north, to Istanbul, and then link with the Orient Express. Another proposal here that you see to the right that was done by a Spanish young architect, was to keep the silos as they are, as a sort of monument, and to transform the whole area into a public space for the city. A little bit like what was done in Hiroshima with the, a sort of witness of the catastrophe in order not to forget, And there are other proposals that were done also by young Lebanese architects going in the same direction. Another way of speaking of reuse, I'm calling it urban reuse. There was a planned highway that was cutting the region into 2 parts. And it was linking the top of the hill to the port area. This highway was planned in 1962. And then there have been, during decades, expropriation by the municipality, buying the lands, etc., etc. And 5 years ago, the Lebanese legislation imposed on such big projects that they should do an impact study and transportation study. The transportation study showed that the creation of this highway will not really help the traffic. It will maybe help for 2, I think the figure was 2% or something of this sort. But on the environmental and heritage assessment, the result of this of creating this highway was catastrophic. So the idea grew and came to transform, since the area is already expropriated by the municipality, why not transform it into an urban park that will link the top of the hill to the port? And the project has been, proposed, and now we are, I think the decision was taken in the municipality to do it, but probably due to the situation today, it may be postponed, but it will be a very important project for the area that would help revitalizing the area and creating a beautiful public space in the middle of these very dense parts of the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tabet. Briefly, is there any questions? Just one short questions to him, if you have, from participants.
Can I say something?
Okay.
Yes, sure, Vasilis. Yes, Vasilis, hello.
Yes, yes.
Can I speak?
Yes, please, Vasilis, you probably can ask first question. Short one, if you have.
I want to ask Jad, whom I know for over 20 years, because Jad, and some of you may not know this, more than 20 years ago, you organized a Congress on war-torn cities.
Yes.
And a wonderful book came out of that. Some of it is very apt today. And now, today he mentioned one word, but only fleetingly, gentrification. But in the email that he sent us in August, he said that one of the things that he's really afraid of is gentrification. And my question to you, Jad, is all what you've shown us, does this danger really continue to exist, that if we don't act quick enough with our work, the big contractors, big money will come in and change the whole character? That's my question.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Vasilis. What your question is very, very really to the point. This was a big danger, and it's still a big danger that the area is transformed into a sort of new Beirut downtown. What we did is, first of all, there was a decision taken at the General Directorate of Urban Planning to put the area under study for 1 year, and then, that could be also 2 years. Put an area under study in Lebanon means that you cannot, all building permits are suspended. And you cannot also do a sort of, addition of parcels. The big problem in this kind of fabric, where you have small lots, is when somebody comes, buys 3, 4, 5 lots, and then builds a big complex there. So when you put it under study, you cannot do this anymore. You cannot change the lot limits. The lots, you cannot merge lots together. The law was passed 3 days ago or 4 days ago, preventing the selling of apartments in the area for 1 year. So it's all apartments in the build, not all the buildings. all apartments in damaged buildings, this is what they say, cannot be sold. And then the law also prevented the merging of lots. And this also is for 1 year. So there we have 1 year to find the ways to keep people there and to prevent gentrification. We have 1 year, but this 1 year, if we don't do anything, the process of gentrification will resume. So what we are trying to do now is really to do a sort of urban and socio-economic study in order to see how we can prevent this kind of gentrification, but also not to freeze completely the area, because you have to accept that there should be transformation, but we have to manage transformation. We have to manage the change. We cannot prevent a change, but we have to manage it and keep the whole social, urban, and architectural and heritage qualities of the area. We are trying to do, we are working hard.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tabet. Shall we move on to, sorry, Amal, I know you have a question, but shall we leave it at the end?
A very small question.
Okay.
A very small question. How far is the highway area from the damaged area from this explosion? How far is the distance between the both areas?
It is, no, it is in the middle of the damaged area.
Oh.
It cuts the damaged area in 2 parts.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for your patience. Shall we move on to the next speaker? Okay, our next speaker is Mr. Daniel Magaberia Davinha. Am I pronouncing the right? Thank you. He is a president of the Council of Architecture and Urbanism of Brasilia. He graduated in Architecture and Urbanism from the University of Brasilia and attained master's degree from the University of Westminster in London. As a distinguished and active architect, he has been working in so many important projects, which has been followed by distinguished awards as well. Today, he will present us about the destruction of modern architecture of Brasilia to address issues on the way how modern heritage building has been dealt with, in particular focusing on embassy buildings in Brasilia. Please, Mr. Magabeira.
Daniel, you are the host now on your presentation. You can control your presentation.
Okay. Is it possible to see?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, it's okay.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much. In fact, the theme of this short presentation was destruction, but after seeing this presentation, I think the correct word wouldn't be destruction. It will be something else. Yes, it was. Anyway, thank you, Son Lee. I don't know if I'm correctly. Good afternoon to all. First, I'd like to thank In-Suk Cho, but especially Roberto Simon for the introduction, the kindly introduction, and for the invitation. Congratulations to the President Thomas Bournier, all vice presidents and all participants from UIA at this web seminar, and wishing in advance a successful event next year here in Brazil. Yeah, the 27th World Congress in Rio. I hope to see you all here. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Well, my name is Daniel. I'm currently the president of the Council of Architects here in Brasilia. I will not present myself again, but after the touching Jet Tabet presentation, I feel a little bit ashamed because my problem is not even close to the problem presented before. What I'm going to present here has no social impact involved and is much easier to solve, let's say, but it doesn't mean that our modern heritage is not in danger. My short talk will be a case study about an imminent, a possible destruction or deconfiguration, I would say, of a modern building here in Brasilia, the Peruvian embassy. My first contact with the embassy was on March this year. I invited the Peruvian architect Jean-Pierre Cruz to a lecture here in Brasilia. He is son of one of the authors of the embassy, Jacques Cruz, who together with Jorge Paes designed the embassy in 1974. My interest about the embassy began through my account on Instagram that registrates here in Brasilia, basically modern architecture that I still preserved here. The name is Brasilia Moderna, at Brasilia Moderna. It presents only well-conserved modern buildings. And I can sadly tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that we have fewer and fewer good examples of modern architecture still preserved in Brasilia. And we desperately need actions to preserve at least what is left here. And as a president of the Council of Brazilian Council of Architecture and Urbanism here in Federal District, we launched this year in Brasilia a stamp, which is this sign here. It's a stamp that recognizes good examples of preservation here in the city. And among more than 1,500 existing buildings, we only identified 30 buildings that we are able to give this stamp, which is called Selo CalDF. It's a worrying name, very worrying, as there are very few buildings that we have only original design quality still preserved. They stamp supported by sectors of local government, but what is nonsense is that they stamp, this one is not recognized by the National Historical and Artistic Heritage Institute here. This is the Brazilian organism that takes care of our heritage site. So there is no recognition about this stamp. The institute decided not be part of this movement, that's this action. And in addition to my work at the council, I'm also part of Atelier Piloto, which is a group of 3 architectural studios here in Brasilia, Bloco, which is my own, ArcBR and MRGB, that has continuously discussed the city and the production of modern architecture here in Brasilia. It was through the Atelier Piloto that we invited Jean-Pierre Cruz. Jean-Pierre is one of the most well-known contemporary Peruvian architects nowadays, and to give this lecture in Brasilia. Important to say that this is not academy. I'm not professor, neither intend to be, and all those lectures were for free. The only intention was to discuss architecture in South America. But let's begin. This is Brasilia, Lúcio Costa's plans, of course you all know, divided by sectors. Most embassies are located in this red area. The Peruvian embassy is in the south wing. This area is a very particular area, has some particularities. Is a place where you can travel, let's say, from continent to continent in seconds. All embassies are here. And also it's a public architectural museum of great architects from all over the world. For example, Pierluigi Nevi did the Italian embassy, Abram Zabludovsky, this is Teodoro, well, Abram, Teodoro Gonzalez and Javier Serranos, they are author of the Mexican embassy, which is a very, very beautiful embassy here. We also have Hans Scharoun in Germany, Chorão, the Portuguese embassy, and so on, so on. In this context, we have the Peruvian embassy. This is the original drawing of Cruz. Jacques Cruz and Jorge Cruz projected the embassy in 1974. The plot, you know, the piece of land were given by the Brazilian government at the time with some conditions. The buildings should represent the best architecture of the country and should be constructed following premises of monumentality, which at that time was very common, I can say, and also should have a special relationship with the city. It's a beautiful building, reasonably well maintained, but as you can see, it's possible to see, to identify some issues related to conservation. The painting has covered the original concrete, but the overall is still well kept. Just like its interiors that conserve originality of the construction. And they are reasonably well maintained as well, as you can see on these pictures. There are some infiltrations, but the main atmosphere, the spatial quality, the materiality is still there. And also there are some great detailing of the chancellery, like for example, the ceiling. This is the ambassador's residence in the same plot, but in the back part, which is also an exquisite example of modern Peruvian architecture, located here in the back. The residence here it's like a party room of the embassy. The interiors are about 100% preserved, except for the cover glasses, but the material very well maintained. Here you can see the roof. See the plants on the corner. You can see that it's necessary to install guardrails, right? But this will not disrupt or harm or disfigure the project, depending on, of course, the material and the design. Yeah? As you can see, the materials are very well maintained. The floor is intact, the walls, the ceiling, all in good conditions. So back to this picture, this visit was in March. At that time, the ambassador was enthusiastic about the project, the project of the embassy, and trying to maintain the original materials. But then I got an email from Jean-Pierre, the guy, the architect, asking me for help. A project of rehabilitation of the embassy was published in Peru. Says the article, without comma, without proper maintenance, the building began to deteriorate and eventually became obsolete in terms of construction. Continue the article. the focus of this project and the technical challenge has not been intended to give the building a new face or identity, but to respect its history. This says the article, which was written by the architect. Continue. Each project decision was carefully made so as not to mutilate the initial architecture, and end up saying, we satisfactorily meet all the demands for the modernity of the original project. I don't know, whatever it is. There is a new building in the front, which is this building here, blocking totally the view of the embassy. And the interior was almost totally changed. The concrete walls, the glassing railing installed not only the chancellery, but also the residence as well. The floors, as you can see, the lighting, you know, the access. And to finalize, the article confirms that all the existing materials were replaced. I mean, floors, walls, facades, tiles, all that were replaced. Important detail that I copied the text as it was written in the article. Those are some images of the new project. Okay. Quite different from the original one. And here it goes. Just to confirm, all materials were replaced. Natural stone floors were replaced by fake stone porcelain tiles floor. I don't know if you have this name in English, but this is, you know, I'm translating from Portuguese to English, but I assume that you understand. Glass railings were installed on the pond. Concrete railing are replaced by smoked glass. Stone floors were replaced by fake stone porcelain tiles. So not only the chancellery, but also the residence. The question here, so, and this is, which rules should be followed to preserve the originality of the building, in the same time that new rules of accessibility and security are implemented? Oops, sorry. Not only the chancellery, right? Okay. Is there a rule for those interventions? Not in Brazil, as far as I know. There are for classical, for colonial architecture, but for modern architecture, we don't have, still don't. So this is an initiative of a non-governmental organization here in Brazil, trying to define rules for intervention in modern architecture and to develop specialized workforce, you know, laborers to do it, because we don't have. Sadly, ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens. Meanwhile, we don't have any movement to protect modern architecture. This is not an isolated movement. This is happening throughout the city. Several modern buildings in Brazil and in the whole country, I can say, are disappearing in grotesque modernization, alleged modernizations. So mirrored materials, all kind of, you know, colored tiles. And to finish my presentation, this is the masterpiece. This is Oscar Niemeyer building here in Brasilia. It's just beside where I live, totally destroyed. So I finish. Thank you all for listening this presentation. Modern architecture in Brasilia is kind of asking for help. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mangabeira. I know we have very much time constraint, but thank you very much for your timing presentations, Mr. Mangabeira, which we saved several minutes due to his presentation was finished really quickly. I will take one short questions for him if you have any. Okay, no one, not yet. But at the end, if you have anything to ask him, please let me know. Okay, shall we move on to the last speaker, who is Mr. Wu. Our final speaker is Mr. Roger Wu from Region 4. Roger is the Executive Director for Project Development of Hafa Music Foundation Limited. He's also the Chief Curator of the 1920 Hong Kong Biennale of Urbanism and Architecture. Previously, he has worked in a number of architectural practices in the UK and Hong Kong, including John McAseen Partners in London. Also, he has developed exceptional expertise by leading international project and heritage works as well. He has lectured at architectural schools in many universities across the UK and design studios as well. He's also actively involved with the Ariba Hong Kong Institute of Architects. Today, he will introduce diverse activities of HAPA mentioned before closure and issues generated from closure due to COVID-19, I'm sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Wu. I will give you the microphone to him.
Thank you. You can all hear me? Yes. Great. Thank you, Moderator Lee, and thank you for the introduction. Now, I will try and whittle through the presentation, but before I go through the presentation, I'm here. I'm in the heritage. So behind me isn't my home, even though I should be. It's about 1:30 in Hong Kong now, and it is the heritage I'm going to talk to you about, and it is not a backdrop, so it is three-dimensional. So we're going to talk about this a bit later on, and also as in the introduction, I was trained as an architect, but my role here is slightly different in that I am the operator of the NGO that runs this heritage, and I've been involved throughout the project since the beginning, since early on in the conception. So in a way, what I'm going to talk to you about is, I'm almost like the joker in the pack. Unlike the other two presentations, it's not academic, it's not grandiose, it's not trying to save the world. Very specific, very practical about a project. Some insights about what I call the marriage between hardware and software in heritage, adaptive reuse. In that being I think a very key element in it. You know, we've seen projects where architects have done the work and they've, you know, I don't know, taking a glory picture, and then the operators come in and the operators don't really connect and things go awry. So I've been very lucky that I've seen both sides of the project. So without sort of keeping you up, I will just go straight into the presentation and here. So just share with me 2 seconds so you can all see. So it used to be called Ho Pa Mansion and Tiger Balm Garden. For those who a lot of you probably never heard of it, basically it's a big mansion for a wealthy individual and his wife. And next door to it, I would just only describe it as a 1930s Disneyland without Mickey Mouse. But in it, it's got a lot of sculptures depicting Chinese culture, and it's one of the very first Chinese kind of leisure facilities for the local Hong Kong Chinese population. And it was the people who built it, the Orban Ho, Orban Pa, the Orr brothers, who actually created, or their father created, the Tiger Balm ointment, and they've made it kind of famous. And the building was built in the 1930s, opened in much fanfare in a style called Chinese eclecticism. Basically, it's a mixture of Chinese and Western architecture and philosophy in a very ad hoc manner. And it's very prevalent in 1930s in Hong Kong at the time because of the place it is, which is very much Hong Kong, old and new, east and west. This is a view. The tower, the tower you see at the background is really, really eye-catching in Hong Kong at the time. And this is a view back from the mansion. And here, this is a view in sort of 1940s and 50s, exactly what it was. But unfortunately, some of it was demolished, which I'll come back to later. And this is what it looked like, because I think a lot of, at the time, there weren't that many leisure facilities. So a lot of people would have been here. And between it was open in 1930s until its closure in 2000, it was open to public for free. So you see a lot of days like these when there's a lot of people, and you see in the foreground, even a lady in kimono all the way from Japan to come and visit it and so on. I've been there. There's a picture of me when I was a kid. I went there. So there's a lot of collective memory. I still got a lot of people who come here with a picture saying, oh, I went there. Can I go back to take a picture of where I took that picture? But unfortunately, a lot of that has been demolished. He's been there, and his son. So, you know, it's kind of, it has its fame. And as you can see, the White Tower is, you know, on a lot of posters at the time to promote the Hong Kong and so on. So it's very, very iconic. In a lot of movies, you know, you see the White Tower in the background, and even in games, computer games. I mean, this was taken from a Street Fighter. If you play first and second generation computer game, it was also in the backdrop. It was in cartoons, real footage on the top right, in a very famous Japanese cartoon. So within the region, it's kind of quite famous. A picture, what is it? Well, it's a Spitfire, obviously, but actually in the background, you can still see the White Tower on the left-hand side on the screen of Ho Pa Mansion and the Tiger Balm Garden. The reason why they built the Tiger Balm Garden is that it's all to do with philanthropy, and they want to promote Chinese culture. The family is really much about, at the time when the Chinese population rising up through the ranks in Hong Kong, under the British rule. We've just had our first a governor who spoke Chinese and English and so on. So it has a lot of connection with how Hong Kong developed. They do a lot of charity. This is Mr. Orban Hall, giving out a lot of food, gifts during the festivities and so on. And you see, very often you see the two brothers here, you know, receiving a lot of people and giving out a lot of aids and so on and so forth. So that spirit is very much in the building. Unfortunately, a lot of it's been developed. If you see the far left, which is the picture that you've seen previously, over the years, a lot of it's been demolished. And what we've left was only the private house and the private garden on the far right. And we've turned it into a music school. And as you can see, it's really, what we really want to do is create a cross-cultural exchange where Chinese and Western music come together and different heritage and social program coming together. And this is where I think the idea of East meet West, new and old come together, inconsistent with the way the building was built originally. So the hardware and the software come together in a really kind of connected manner. Now, activities include music classes, concerts, performance, music festivals, heritage programs, social programs, collaborations, and private functions. I'll go back. And this is the view behind me in a daytime with a lot of, the furniture was from the original family and the carpet was new. Everything new we do is in a very contemporary manner. So you can always see what's new and what's old. We've had our, we even use this space to train our docents. So we connect with the community a lot through our programs. That is me trying to engage in a heritage program to show how to do Shanghai plaster. And we talk about how we restore the artifacts behind me in the cabinets, full of artifacts that was found in the house. And the stained glass, as you can see on either side of the moon gate, with a whole workshop to show people how these were restored and so on and so forth. So the program within that was also really connected with the house itself. The ladies who wrote the book about the house also gave a talk and so on and so forth. And the previous owner, we even have a program where the previous owner spoke with our docents. So the docents even get the first-hand interview with the owners, and then they've got fun, sort of nice stories to tell when they were leading. And social programs through music all happening in here. and so on and so forth. You know, collaborations, Shakespeare for all, inclusivity is actually very much, you know, this idea of English drama and as you can see, you know, different ethnic minorities and so on, all mixed together. I think that's really trying to carry through the spirit of the place. Again, you know, so collaborations, award-winning collaborations, you know, school children and so on and so forth. So what are the effects of pandemic? Well, the music classes, we only be able to do about 5%. We can't really do any concerts. We can't do any festivals, no heritage program to speak of, social programs and collaborations. And we were only doing about 5% of our private functions. So what's our responses? Well, actually closure we have to close our public visits and guided tours because of the restrictions. What made it worse was that it was all preceded by the impact of the social unrest in Hong Kong. So in a way, it's actually about a whole year's worth of time under closed doors almost. And also this unpredictability of the situation, because we all don't know what's going to happen. You know, where is ground zero? I mean, how can we plan for this when we are not sure where ground zero is? But at the end of the day, for us, we found it to be the ideal time for us to reflect on our core value, look back at what we've done and trying to plan for the future, because these are the things that will keep us. It doesn't matter under what situation, what pandemic or otherwise, or so on and so forth. So what we've done was obviously we implemented all of these things, which I will show you some photos, but most importantly, I want to introduce right at the end, there was 3 very interesting programs that we did, which really try to tie everything together. So obviously the health and safety measures, you know, tours that we do, we have masks and so on and so forth. You know, classes, whenever everybody agrees to hold them, we actually have to have these sort of measures. We're very lucky to have enough space. So even our music classes, we were able to separate them and so on and so forth. You know, even singing classes, we were able to host in really magnificent surroundings. And, you know, we managed to do a lot of sharings using the, you know, it's very basic technology, but we managed to actually host workshops online. We managed to work, you know, as such. And also we start streaming some of our performances, even though it's nothing like being here, but at least it will keep showing people that we are still here and things are still happening. It's another way of engaging, and then that entices them to come here when the things get better. Now, these 3 is a very interesting proposal, interesting project that, in fact, we've done before any of the closures. Was that what about the people who couldn't come here? The people, the elderlies who were confined to the elderly homes. We've actually organized a program where one of the elderlies who is really well spoken came and delivered a tour. And they came with him a 360-degree camera. So the people in the elderly home, you can see in the picture, they can actually scroll as if they were in the space. And when the guide was handing out the leaflets, which you can see on the desk, there were people in the elderly home handing out leaflets to the elderly. So the people, although they couldn't be here physically, they would manage to actually experience some of it as closely as possible. So this has given us some idea of how we, with everything happening, how we could move forward. It doesn't matter how long this is going to last. We were able to deliver things to their doorsteps, as it were. The other one that we did was very interesting, is that as you can see behind us, you can actually touch a lot of the artifacts here and a lot of the architecture here. And we developed in collaboration with the Society for the Blind, a tool which would describe things in a way that would actually make sense to the visually impaired. But we produce these really nice series of books where it's over and above Braille. It creates textured maps of what you see there is the moon gate in texture. So the visually impaired can touch. What's also important is that it created ceiling, the map of the ceiling, which we can't touch anyway. So now everybody can touch. We were very happy for this to be, the inclusivity of it is not just about making the visually impaired see, but it's about us learning about sight and learning about senses and so on. And because of closures, a few of the events that we've done have to be cancelled at the last minute when the food was already been kind of prepared. So we took the opportunity to line up people who were really passionate about avoiding food waste and sponsor us to redistribute the food to elderly homes and so on and so forth. So in a way, it's really to try and make the worst out of the, make the best out of the worst situation, and everybody gets something out of it. So some lessons learned. Well, and I think it is, I'll come back to this core value thing right at the end, but it is important to think of what it is that we do in this heritage. In other words, the software as well as the hardware, to make sense of what are the core values of the heritage. Secondly, be agile. You know, I think in this day and age, you just need to come up, for example, like the food waste initiative. It really just came together at the very, very last minute. And I think everybody had to kind of react in that sort of sense. And the other thing is that, you know, whatever technology like what we're doing here in Zoom, you know, hopefully you'll get a sense of the space here through digitally, and embrace a collective, collaborative approach. Because what we found is everybody wanted to do something, but I think on our own, a lot of things we wouldn't be able to do. So I think that would be something that we need to do. And I think what's more important, we need to think about rethink. I think we heard something about earlier about the over tourism and lack of tourism is a problem. But I think in terms of policy down, we need to rethink how we gauge heritage tourism. What is an engagement? Does an engagement need to be here? Does an engagement, can an engagement count when you're doing it remotely? And what can you add to it when you are doing it remotely? So I think that's something that we all need to think about. So finally, what I really like to do is that we took the time to really refine what we think the spirit of the place is. It's really to extend the legacy, continue the legacy of the philanthropic endeavors of the All family, whereby we are sharing what we have in a holistic way, not just about music, but about heritage and social program to the public, which hopefully it's consistent with the building itself, where East comes to West, West comes to East, new and old all mixed together, so that we have no idea. I mean, you know, you can, it's not about stylistic approach, it's not about academic approach, it is about the opportunity. In a way, it's very much like Hong Kong as well. So I think I've had the privilege of stepping outside of my architectural profession slightly, but from a operator perspective, and it's really given us a very clear picture for adaptive reuse projects. I think the more successful one tends to have that sort of balance between how you kind of, you know, connect the software and the hardware, and how you really focus on the spirit of the place, which I'm happy that I'll end the presentation here, and for you to have any questions if you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wu. It was a very interesting project and still ongoing issues that you have. Is there any last questions to him? Short one, anyone? Okay, maybe we will come back. Shall we just probably it's some region it's too late, so shall we, without any break time, shall we continue our discussion sessions for the next 15 minutes? If you open the chat window, then there are some comments and also there are some questions as well. We have one question already, which has been done by Mr. Robertson. Question to all three speakers. He asked about very important questions about the role of individual architect as well as a collective groups of UIA in those situations of all three cases, which is very much relevant to threading all three presentations, I believe. Especially, we do know that there is a lot of discussions to understand heritage as a process, not a thing. In all three cases, I could clearly see that heritage is becoming very much important in the sustainability issues and also sustaining the society as well. Shall we start with the first question by Mr. Rogerson? Sorry. Did all the speakers understood his questions? If you open the chat window, then there is his questions. I will read for you. Question for Jed Tabet, but also for Daniel and Roger. What can we do as an individual architect and collectively as a UIA do to help?
Well, maybe. Individual architects, for the time being, I don't know what individual architect can do. Support us, that's all, moral support for us. But UIA, there are real possibilities. We are working hard with UNESCO. I'm going to Paris on next Saturday. I'm staying there for 2 weeks. I have already several commitments and meetings with UNESCO people, with also some French officials, with also European and other, and also with ambassadors of different countries in order to organize, and I mean the way they can help and support us in our reconstruction process. UNESCO has several projects. They are launching a sort of a program to help Beirut. It's called Li Beirut or For Beirut in English. And I'm sure that UIA has a lot of work to do with UNESCO. There is a lot of possibility with UNESCO. In a later time, I mean, we cannot do it now, but we may launch some international competitions for example, a memorial. For example, if we get a decision from the government, the official decision to keep the silos as a monument for the destruction, we may launch an international competition for the whole area. We may also ask for help from UIA for basically issues related to legal problems. We have a lot of legal problems in the area between the owners, the tenants, etc., etc. How can you rehabilitate in such situations? Maybe UIA can help us through UNESCO or with UNESCO. Well, there is a lot of possibilities. For the time being, we are mainly on emergency measures, really. We have to find shelter for people. We have to start doing work on the heritage buildings that are in danger of destruction or of collapse. So it's basically an emergency situation. But I think in 2 or 3 months, things will become clearer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tabet. Shall we move on to maybe Mr. Magavera?
Yes, thank you. I totally agree with Mr. Jad Tabet. And I'd like to add some information that we have here in Brazil, a Brazilian saying that if we architects don't do politics, politicians will do architecture. So this is why we have to move on. We have to open our minds to think not only about, you know, the materiality of the architecture, but also the meaning and the social impact of it. So I only would like to add this information because I totally agree. And I can also understand the difference, you know, of levels of the problematic that we have. And this is, of course, very clear in those 3 presentations we had today. Yeah, it's amazing how almost everything has to do with architecture and urbanism. So that's it. I think we had to think not only as architects, but as politicians as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Magavera. Mr. Wu, would you like to add the comment?
Yeah, I'm very. I'd like to answer it from a different angle, not necessarily individually or a UIA perspective, but as a profession. I think architects, you know, I mean, you're right. I mean, a lot of things is connected with architecture and urbanism, but I think for us, I think if we again broaden our sphere a little bit, you know, when I mentioned collaboration, I think you know, why not with the medical profession? Why not with economists? Why not with accountants? I think in a way they have a lot to tell us about our cities, about our architecture. And from that kind of perspective, from that sort of collaboration, we will create this connection between hardware and software. I'd just like to tell you an example, what I meant by that. When I was in London, I was fortunate enough to be in touch with a project that the office was doing, which was after the earthquake in Haiti. Everybody, all the international aid poured in to build houses, temporary housing for the people, the 3 million people who were displaced or homeless. But in fact, we were lucky enough to think about it differently. We actually, the office actually rebuilt the iron market that was collapsed. And then a lot of people thought, why do you want to do that? You know, heritage conservation, you know, that's the last thing on your mind. But in fact, the reason why we did it was we look at the economics of it. In that, when we rebuilt it, the people there have a means and a place to trade. They would earn their living, so they have their own pride back, their own confidence back. And by then, they can have enough financial support to build the house that they want to build, rather than the sheds that we think would be suitable for them. And then after a while, they will have to move out anyway. So in a way, you know, we all very, sometimes we, as architects and in profession, we almost too focus on the hardware. And the sort of that kind of, you know, if you step back and think about how things are not just an object, not architecture is not a thing, is neither is heritage, is not a thing, is a process, then you're beginning to unlock some of the hidden potentials of a lot of these sort of opportunities.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Rogerson, would you like to have any comment on that? Because that was your question at the beginning.
Well, I suppose starting from the last answer, from Roger's answer, I can't agree more. And I think a lot of what he said also feeds into some of what Jed was talking about in his presentation too. It's how you maintain and retain the society as it was, whilst at the same time preserving what was so important, but allowing things to change equally. And I think by allowing people to do things themselves, obviously that is, by facilitating people to do things themselves, that is probably the most important thing we can help to do.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other participants comment on these questions? Okay, Mr. Han.
Thank you, Sujan. I think this webinar is very, very good and very inspiring. Three totally different cases, but we saw how architects and everyday people approach different situations, like a Beirut disaster, and how we deal with it. Just not only just a building renovation, but also talking about intangible values to recreate. And also, as Daniel presents, that nowadays modern architecture in early 20th centuries becomes actually another area of heritage, and how we deal with it. You know, what is the standard? Where we go back? How much we have to preserve? And also the last presentation by Roger, I was very impressed that how you dealt with all this pandemic situation. It becomes almost a milestone for many different heritage maintenance and problems nowadays. So I think it is very inspiring seminar, as well as for me as a UIA vice president and many bureau members here. It will be actually our role, together with our the INSUK heritage work program, that sort of set the directions or maybe guide with all these different questions and problems. You know, I think this is really worthwhile to research and try to maybe cannot achieve everything in the one time, but through the time we start to set the standard or the ideas or the goals. Let's say how we deal with this modern architecture, how we deal with this pandemic situation, how we deal with the disaster. I think from the wisdom of all of you, I think UIA can actually lead into the some directions many policymakers will take. So that's my inspiration and my overall impression of this seminar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Han. We have a very limited time left, but Dr. Bandran has some questions.
Yes, thank you very much. My question is to Dr. Thabit from Lebanon. And remembering that we attended an event, which is the Arab Architects Award a year ago, very close to the area where the explosion happened, I would just like to ask him very few questions. Could there be a long-term plan to move the port to a different area where you can keep a touristic port near the cultural and residential areas and have a commercial and industrial port somewhere a little bit further from cultural areas and heritage areas and residential areas? That is one question. The second question is, how different does he see things when they are rebuilt after this explosion? Because I could see that there is a very big disadvantage of using huge glass facades for buildings. And I don't know how the glass was and the other materials, how has it been dealt with? Yes, these are my two questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Afaf. Both questions are really relevant. The first about the port is really very relevant. You know, what happens is that the explosion was basically on the third and did damages on the third and a little bit the second basins. These basins were not really operational during today in the port, because the real port is more to the north in the fourth basin, and there were projects to build also a fifth basin. The second basin, the second and third basins are basically storage places, warehouses. So the idea that is among us, and we are all working on this, is to push the officials to try to find another destination for this part of the port. Obviously, this requires a real study of the place of the port of Beirut in the eastern Mediterranean coast, etc., etc. But basically, what we are pushing for is to transform this part of the port into a port that is in relation with the city. Restore the relationship between the city and the port, between the city and the sea. A little bit like was done in different countries, in Marseille, in Genoa, in Barcelona, etc., etc. So we're pushing toward this. This is the first issue, and your question is really very relevant. The second issue about what was it? I'm sorry. What was the second?
How different would you think architecturally and urban design-wise you would configure?
Yes, about the glass. Yeah.
Yes.
Truly, what the blast showed that all these buildings that were done with glass and alucobon, etc., which is the trend during the last 10 years, didn't, were completely destroyed with the blast. While other buildings from built with concrete on a more, more traditional way, modernism of the 60s, for example, these buildings could withstand the explosion much better. So I think it is a real lesson for our young architects that using glass and alucobon is not a very sustainable way of building. These type of facades are not really very sustainable, mainly in a country like Lebanon, where even if you don't have blast, you have sun, you have humidity, you have near the sea, etc., etc. So it's a real interesting question. And I hope our young architects that follow the trends they see in the magazines will change a little bit their mind.
Thank you very much. We are very last phase. Mr. Fintikakis has the last questions. Yes.
It is not exactly a question, it's a fact. We are happy today because we heard three very politically sensitive presentations concerning the heritage in different parts of the world. And I was impressed by Jet Tabet's presentation. And I will share with everybody you, after tomorrow, a similar presentation that was made by Vassim Nagy, president of UMAR. So I think, dear Jet Tabet, that we could be helpful to you in any kind of sensitivity you feel the architects could offer. So the presentation of Daniel, I was impressed because in a contemporary environment, he added the political sensitivity, which is important and which links, let's say, the environment that we know about Brasilia, the favelas, with Brasilia. That was in my mind. Last but not least is Mr. Roger presentation, which linked the pandemic with the social distancing and the problems that the society is facing now. Where? In Korea. Then I believe that in the next time, dear Insuk, you will invite the vice presidents of Region 1 and Region 5 to make similar presentations touching the political sensitivity of architecture in our heritage. And heritage is the result of different political aspects. Thank you, Insuk. Thank you, everybody.
Roberto.
Yes. Dr. Joe, you do?
Yes.
Okay.
Roberto.
Okay.
Simon,
Okay.
Mr. Simon.
Yes, thank you, Insuk. Thank you, Sujon. It's just a statement. I am totally agree with John Rule, with the statement John Rule. I am very convinced, was inspired this moment. Why? Because we have three kind of blows, three kind of explosions in different situations. We have the explosion as an explosion, really explosion, and dramatic, because many people was suddenly was in the middle of that. The second is step by step, the baby step or step in Brasilia, because we are looking for how we can manage the situation. And Roger, who explained for us the problem of pandemic is three different cases. Three different cases who explain a lot of things for us. We need to be very and we need to pay attention in everything, in each detail. Many things happened in this year, and we still happen. UIA, and I talk like a bureau member, we need to do something. We need help in something. I don't know. Maybe Vasilis could give us your inspiration with experience of 20 or more years in UIA to create any climate to this situation. Thank you very much, and congratulations you and Sursock and all the people involved in that, Sejong and everything.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, all the three presenters. Again, I will give microphone to Dr. Cho.
Yes, we have to wrap up our today's session. Actually, we were planning to have a 1 hour and a half webinar, but half an hour was exceeded. And now it's 3 o'clock in the morning in Korea. And I apologize on behalf of two persons. The first one is the Region 1 Vice President Lorenzo. He had a very, very important appointment ahead of this one. So he couldn't attend today's meeting. And the other one is my co-director, Rizvan Bayramov. He had a heart attack. He was in a hospital. Tomorrow, he will be released from the hospital. So he couldn't attend the meeting also. Thank you, everybody, for attending this meeting. And special thanks to three presenters. And also special thanks to all the bureau members who attend this evening in Paris, not in Korea. Korea is at 3 o'clock. And actually, I fell down and was injured in my face. You can see my face, but now it's recovered. But there were some difficulties to arrange this meeting, but I thank you all to attend this meeting. And the last thanks to Dr. Soo-Jung Lee. When I asked her to do this job, it's a really a short time. And then she accepts this guest moderator. I thank you, Dr. Soo-Jung Lee and the Heritage Administration of Korea. And maybe we can organize a very similar meeting, especially for Region 1 and Region 5. Then maybe we can have another moderator or another presenter. Thank you all. We have to finish because we already exceed half an hour time. So I will circulate all the recordings and the presentation materials. I already sent the materials to UIA headquarters, but if you need, maybe I'll ask the headquarters how we can share all the presenters' presentation material. Thank you, everybody. We will finish it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Isaac.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Good to see all of you.
Yeah. Total number of participants was almost 70. Thank you very much.
Ciao.
Bye.
Good to see you all.
Good to see you.